Hey guys, it's Mountain Walk, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about Splash Mountain. Yes, that's right. Not only is this a new Premodern deck tech thingy, but it's also a completely new deck. That's right, I just made this up out of nowhere. Yep, I just conjured it out of nothing. It was amazing. It's something I've been thinking about for about a year or so, or whatever. Just stuff I've just been randomly, writing down cards I want to play with and interesting thoughts. And so it just eventually, like, just a couple days ago, I sort of like, oh yeah, just all sort of came together. So I was like, man, this is sweet. I'm pretty excited. So I figured, let's go ahead and let's do it. Let's look and see what this deck is, what it's all about. As you can see, it plays Temporal Spring. If that doesn't excite you, I mean, nothing in this world will excite you. Come on, who doesn't like Temporal Spring? Right? Right? All right. So, like I said, it's all brand new deck. Came out of my brain. I actually did a search on TC decks to see if there was any decks that played Temporal Spring, like any of them at all. And the answer is zero. No decks played Temporal Spring. Now, a long time ago, like around 10-ish or so years ago, Temporal Spring was actually a card that was often played in the sideboard of the uh, blue, green, red threshold decks, which eventually became like um, Rug Delver once Innistrad was released. And they often played the Temporal Spring in the sideboard, just as an answer to a bunch of stuff. Again, it's a great tempo card, answers anything, which is really nice. But yeah, so uh, we're playing Temporal Spring, a bunch of other stuff, and it's sort of what we're trying to do is sort of LD kind of tempo-ish sort of thing. A lot of random stuff I wanted to play. I'm not sure, like I said, if everything is like perfect yet. I'm still working on it. I've been working on it for half a minute, so I haven't play tested it or anything. I'm still not exactly sure if I'm completely right, but I'm on the right track, I think. So yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff, a lot of random stuff you guys have probably never seen. Um, but let's do it. Let's look at this thing. Let's look at Splash Mountain. Of course, the Splash Mountain because it's the water ride, but also it's a log flume ride. So like that makes sense because obviously blue and green, right? Forest and water and does that make sense? That should make sense. I'm a genius, so it works. Also I considered calling it Spice World because of all of the random offbeat cards, spicy choices, so to speak. A lot of these things are from like the 90s or whatever, which late 90s Spice Girls, Spice World. Does this work? And I'm not sure. Either or, Spice World, aka Splash Mountain, either would work. So basically, the plan is to play one drop dorks, so birds or elves, accelerate into something like Winter's Grasp or Temporal Spring, or even against some decks. Sometimes you just want to go call, and then next turn call again. Against like aggro decks, whatever calls very good there. Um, and then, yeah, so Temporal Spring into like say Argothian Worm is pretty strong. Obviously, sometimes it's just a 4 mana LD spell. Sometimes it's a 4 mana 6/6 with trample. So yeah, that's kind of sweet. So that's interesting. And then of course rounding out the creatures, we have Mystic Snake is just a little bit more um, countery kind of stuff, which is pretty sweet. And it's just another permanent for opposition. And I like playing with a little bit of counter magic. This lets you deal with random stuff. Um, and Ravenous Baloth again, just another good beater, good against aggressive decks, of course. And Wall of Roots is a mana accelerant and another just a blocker against aggressive decks, of course. And on to the random stuff. So Boomerang just is a random answer to things. This is basically kind of thought of it as like a fifth Temporal Spring, but it's mostly just you can't really cast it early often, or at least not regularly because of the double blue. But it is a great answer like mid-late game to stuff. Um, Again, Mana Leak, easier to cast with just one blue. Winter's Grasp, which is just another LD spell, just another 3 mana LD spell. Temporal Spring, again, putting stuff on top of the library, again, deprives them of a draw step, more or less. which is pretty sweet. Again, great with Plow Under, of course. Plow Under's a sweet card, super fun to cast that and just put more and more stuff on top of their library. Opposition, of course, everyone knows what that does. Again, just you have all these random dorks and stuff, so after you're done ramping, you can drop an opposition and just tap them out, keep them locked down. Pretty sweet. And then, of course, that brings us to a card that I forgot even existed, but I remember actually playing with this thing back around, I think it was Ravnica Kamigawa standard, aka one of the best standards ever, and that was like the blue-red Magnivore deck played Annex. And this is, that was basically just all like sorceries, like Eye to Nowhere and Stone Rain and stuff. And then Annex 2 was good in that deck because, well, it's just pure LD. So you just wipe them all out, then get your huge Magnivore and beat them down. That's really fun. So yeah, we got that. So Annex is, I mean, I'm thinking maybe I should go up to 4 on this thing because it ramps you and it obviously deprives them of land, which is really great. So this is a great card to ramp out on turn 3. I mean, yeah, that's super awesome. I love it. So that's always good. That's always good. So some of this, like I said, some of this is in flux. Some of it, maybe not needed. But I wanted to play like opposition in a deck, but I didn't really want to play any of the survival stuff because the survival stuff, like the survival game plan, is automatically like requires you to play like a ton of creatures, and then also you have to play like a certain amount of creatures too. They have to be specific ones, and then you can fill it out with other things. But also the survival plan is very, very slow. Survival is very mana intensive, and it is kind of wonky in that respect. So I wanted something that's a little bit like the Squirrel opposition. As you can see, I don't have opposition or excuse me, not opposition, but Squirrel Nest in here. Again, that could be another good card to play. But you want to curve out, so it's not a card you really want to play early. So it could be played as like 1 or 2 copies. I think that would be fine because obviously it's good against like aggressive decks. It's good against control decks and stuff. It's not that great for when you're trying to do your nut draw, but that's something else also to look into. So we'll have to look into that. But that specifically is one we aren't going to talk about later. But again, obviously it's a major card that is missing, but it would be something I like to play. So yeah, I wanted to play something with, well, a little faster, a little more tempo-y. I mean, like I said, the survival game plans are slow, and I've like played a bunch of survival decks, and it's like, okay, yeah, I get it. I want to play something different, and obviously this deck's a lot different. So, okay, that brings us to the mana. We might need to play. I'm thinking maybe cutting like an Undiscovered Paradise because you never really want to draw 2. That can be a little wonky. So maybe just going down to 1 and adding another City of Brass or another island. Not 100% sure. But yeah, mana is pretty good though. I think that's about enough, especially with the birds, Llanowar Elves, and Wall of Roots. And then of course the sideboard, all the usual suspects. Of course, there's a lot of different things we can play in there. Argothian Worm specifically was a card I loved. We'll talk about that for a second before we move on. Argothian Worm is sweet. I remember this is like one of my favorite cards from back in the day. I just loved the art. I loved how huge it was, a 4-mana 6/6, and I was like, oh my gosh, I love both of these modes. I like the 4-mana 6/6 trample mode. I like the 4-mana Stone Rain mode. That was sweet. I liked all those things. I'm like, yeah, this is great, So, oh yeah, also, now I think about it, I guess Creeping Mold a possibility. I think a lot of the old Secret Force decks played Creeping Mold. That might be an option too. I definitely have a Secret Force list I'm working on, so that's something to look out for in the future. But yeah, Argothian Worm, very cool. Haven't really been able to play it anywhere else. This card is sweet. Yeah, I mean, it's Argothian Worm. What more do you want, right? Gosh, what a sweet card. But let's look at the sideboard a little bit more. All right, so one of the things we could do, we cut some of the random stuff and play 4 Living Wish main deck, and that'll open up the sideboard to things like, for example, Kamal, I think is the big one. Kamal is really great because, well, he's huge, or well, pretty big. He's pretty big, and then of course you can overrun. You can also like make their lands, creatures, And you can't really take advantage of that, I guess, now that I think about it. Not really. Nope, not really. Never mind. So that part's kind of not that great, but the turning all the overrunning, of course, is pretty sweet. Turns all your random crap, lets you just basically one-shot them then and there. Man of War, again, just another answer to creatures. Again, another pretty sweet tempo play. Same thing with Octavia Orangutan, just another way to destroy artifacts. And of course, guys, Coatl's pretty good. Lots of mana ramp, so if you draw like a slower hand, you need more lands or something. Cradle's pretty sweet. I thought about maybe playing it main deck. That'd be something to test out too, but something I haven't thought of, haven't done. Yeah, again, Cradle can be kind of awkward a little bit, but that's okay. So this is a different configuration of the sideboard. Of course, you play like a Growthian Worm main deck, or excuse me, sideboard 2 to wish for, so you can wish for basically a Stone Rain, which is pretty sweet. All right, again, here's another bunch of cards that we can play on the sideboard. Submerge, again, more tempo, more free stuff, really sweet. Stunted Growth, people I'm sure have never seen this card before. This is an interesting one because this will go well with stuff like Temple Spring and Plow Under, where you can you basically mind twist them for 3. So, I mean, I don't know how this was. Color Pie was pretty crazy back in the day. I don't know what the deal is with this card. Yeah, putting their cards on top of their library, that's interesting. I don't know if that's strictly like even a black thing, because I mean, it acts like a mind twist, but putting cards from their hand on top of their library, I don't even know what color does that. I'd have to check the old Color Pie articles by Rosewater, where he details like what color can do what and when. I suspect though this is probably not a green thing, since I can't really think outside of something like well, like Plow Under, putting lands on top. Anyways, it's a very unique card. Interesting, might be pretty sweet. And of course, Treachery, again, more free stuff allows us to double spell, so we can like Treachery their due, then Plow Under them and stuff, and just do crazy stuff like that, which is super great. And then of course, Bearscape, this is a great card against control decks, because you can just resolve it early, and then late game you can start exiling stuff and then making bears and stuff. So it's great after a wrath, things like that. And so lets you not run out of gas, sort of like Sylvan Library, but actually kills them. And of course, we got Spreading Algae. Algae? I always say algae sometimes. Anyways, Spreading Algae. This, of course, if you have playing against decks that are mostly black or a lot of black, this card's pretty unbeatable, especially since you're playing any additional land destruction. I mean, they won't really be able to do anything. So that's pretty brutal. Yeah. Yeah, this card's silly. I don't know. This is pretty, I mean, talk about frustrating to play against, but Spreading Algae is good. Again, Compost is another one, another black hoser that would be playable too. So, all right, now we're talking a little bit about main deck stuff, a little bit of main deck cards. And of course, we have Snap. Snap is, I mean, again, a free spell, so it lets you snap into some 3 or 4 mana spell or something, so that's pretty sweet. Snap into an Annex would be pretty cool. Holistic Wisdom lets you trade certain cards for other cards, so you can turn like your, say they have no lands or only 1 or 2 lands, you can, change your land destruction spells for Call of the Herds or whatever, if you want to put more pressure on them, things like that. Or vice versa, Then we have Repulse. Again, this is another sweet card. I love it. The cantrip is great, and just instant speed, just bounce stuff is, good. So the whole thing is just pretty awesome. Hystrodon, again, another way to keep the cards flowing. And I love Hystrodon. This card's great. Puts pressure on them, draws cards, and it's good against aggro decks because it's got a big butt. And then, of course, drawing cards against them is very great. And you can curve into it on turn 2, and then turn 3 you can morph it. Good stuff. And of course, Predict. Once we're putting all these things on top, say you can Temporal Spring a big thing, like a big dude, and then you can predict them, and that's awesome. So that's another option too. That's really cool. And there's all sorts of other strategies we can sort of talk about too, because you can maybe play more like more flashback stuff, like Grizzly Fate or whatever would be a good one. So like that would be like if we're milling ourselves, or you know, there's all sorts of things we can do. Lots of stuff going on. So, okay. Now, here's more main deck stuff we can play. Like I said, with if we're playing more um, things like Grizzly Fate, more flashback token makers and stuff like that, something like Fact or Fiction is really good because then it, you know, presents an even like less good um, option for your opponent because then it's like, oh, do I give them the call the herd and let them put the Grizzly Fate in the graveyard, or do I, you know, how do you split it? It's basically kind of lose-lose, which is really sweet. Fact Fiction is just a powerful card, obviously, on its own. Then we have something like Blastoderm. Again, if we're really wanting to tempo them out and make use of all the extra turns we're getting by, you know, destroying lands or whatever, Blastoderm's pretty great. Puts on a lot of pressure, difficult to remove. Obvious immunity to Swords to Plowshares and Smother and things like that is very good. Wall of Roots, again, another good blocker against um, the dorks and stuff. And if we want a more mana ramp and just um, more percentage points against aggressive decks, Wall of Roots is good. Same thing with Wall of Blossoms, except it, you know, cantrips, which sort of brings us to Erratic Portal, which is good with like sort of giving our guys pseudo vigilance in the late game, or like letting us reuse Mystic Snake, or like if I said if we had Wall of Blossoms, just more cantripping, drawing through more cards. Exclude, sort of like Repulse, again, just another great card against um, aggressive decks, sort of, depending on what they're casting, you know, but yeah, just counter creature, draw a card, pretty sweet. And of course, there's more Ravenous Baloths because, well, Ravenous Baloth is sweet. It's just a good threat to ramp into, and it's just a good card in general. Just good all around kind of dude. So maybe more of those would be something to look at. But yeah, that's it. I mean, like I said, I haven't tested the deck yet. There's so much stuff to do with it. I'm still working on it, but it's definitely really cool. I've always wanted to play with Temporal Spring in a bunch of decks. I remember playing it like with Jungle Barrier and stuff. Um, Jungle Barrier is pretty sweet. That's an old one too. Yeah, from also from Apocalypse. And Gaia Skyfolk. Man, what a weird janky deck that was. But yeah, anyways. So that's it. That's it for today, guys. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this gives you some sort of ideas. So thanks for stopping by and have a great day.